All right. Welcome to my YouTube page. In this video, I'm going to be going over just a very brief introduction of what large language models are and the things you can do with them and how it relates to your legal practice or just in general how a lawyer might be interested in these kinds of things. Um, so I'll first start off by saying that I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Georgia, and I've been playing around with these large language models for some time now, and they're really useful for a lot of different things. I'll mention some of those use cases in this video, but you should have a decent understanding just kind of generally how you could use them after watching this video. But starting off here with this website called Hugging Face, and if you were like me, originally I didn't know anything about Hugging Face, but this is pretty much the primary place to go for large language models. Hugging Face is, I believe it's a public company now. They're not based in the United States, but they have an office here, I believe. But they are publicly traded now. But anyways, Hugging Face is a little bit of a weird name. Reminds you of that movie Alien, where it like latches onto your face and like injects eggs into the host, and then it bursts out of your chest. So totally different, of course. You can tell it's a very happy-go-lucky company, apparently. They have this icon. You will see this thing everywhere. I personally find it very annoying. But anyways, so basically you're on the Hugging Face website. And if you click on the models button here, it takes you to the top models. I'm not sure how they rank these actually, but if something is trending, like it has a lot of downloads in a short period of time, then that model will be on here. So even though its total downloads might not be the highest, if it has a relatively short period of time where there's a lot of downloads, it'll be here. Um, but you can see there's over 1.5 million models. So the first question is like, what is a large language model? Um, it's not a simple answer, really. Um, Large language models come in different categories. So some models are the typical chat models, like everybody's heard of Chat GPT by now. Um, some models are good at recognizing pictures and describing what is in a picture. Some models are good at um, taking audio and then transcribing it to text, or some models can take text and make audio. So the obvious example would be like Siri on your phone or Alexa or whatnot. I mean, those are basically taking text and converting it to an audio. So large language models is a really broad definition, and you can see all the categories here on the left side. So if you want to learn more about it, you can click on some of these categories, and then you'll get a list. Like if you go to audio, text to text, this list will show you sort of the models in that category ranked by whatever algorithm they have here to rank them. But it's not too difficult. You just, if you click on one of these models, you can see what's called the model card. And usually the creators of these models are pretty good. As far as having a description, sometimes there is none, but you can just scroll down and see kind of a description. And most of the well-known creators will also have a simple example of how to use it. And if you're like me, about a year or a year and a half ago, I didn't know what any of this was. This is Python. It's a name of a programming language, but they give you examples of how to use it. If you're not interested in learning Python, I learned it as a hobby, and I am not an expert by any means, but I know enough of it now. But your IT department may use this, or whoever does the tech in your firm. They're probably very familiar with Python. Um, if they're using large language models, if you want to incorporate them into your practice, then they're going to probably have to be familiar with this. There are other libraries like PyTorch. I know that sounds sort of funny, but PyTorch is basically one of the primary libraries that is used to run these large language models, but that goes beyond the scope of this video. But you can see it has 150,000 downloads and has all the information here to get your tech person up and running with the model. It shows the size of the file, so you're talking about um, approximately for 16 to 17 gigabytes. Um, when you're running these large language models, you really need a graphics processor or a GPU in your computer if you want to run them locally. But if you have a server in your firm that has a GPU, then you can have clients just simply connect to the server and get responses from the large language model. So in a either whether it's a small firm or a big firm, sometimes that is the best way to do it, unless you want to be entirely local. Local meaning have it on your computer and it goes wherever you go. And there are certain laptops now that have enough memory where they can run these large language models. And over time, these large language models have gotten smaller and for the same quality but smaller as far as like VRAM, video memory required and whatnot. So basically the resources you need to run these has reduced, but the quality has gotten better. And there are new models coming out all the time. I mean, literally 20 hours ago, this model was updated. You could see here. This one was updated 5 days ago. And there are very well-known companies that release these models. And there's a lot of discussion online about them. And so the main ones right now are Quen, which is really good. Llama, everybody's heard of Llama. They haven't released a new. Llama is created by Facebook. These models they call Llama models after the animal. They were really popular for a long time, but Facebook hasn't released a new one in a while. Mistral is another really popular and reputable one. They release really good models. Google's weighing in with their models. I mean, Microsoft is releasing their Phi models, which are is spelled PHI. So you have sort of a competition among all these vendors. Some are really well-known companies, others are um, just obscure companies, but they're still good. Their models they produce are still good. So really, if you can delve into it yourself, or if you have somebody in your IT department who's really knowledgeable about them, I'm sure they can advise you on what model you need. Um, One of the best models I've found that I use every day are called Whisper models. So if you just type in Whisper, it'll narrow it down, and it's created by OpenAI. So that is the same company that creates ChatGPT. And these models are really useful for transcribing audio to text. So if you have a large audio file and nobody wants to read or listen to a 3 hour deposition, well, if they can avoid it or make it more efficient anyways, right? We all need to do that sort of thing. But to make it more efficient, for example, you can transcribe the entire audio of the deposition into some kind of text file, and then you could just search. Or you can read faster than the speakers, so it saves you time. Just read the text file. You could skim it. You could do searches in the text. So if you know the person being deposed said something and you can't remember where in the audio, you can search the text file and get an approximation of where they said it and get their exact words. Now, if you're using Whisper, then you want to be careful because these models are not perfect. So there are different sizes of these Whisper models. If you use the larger ones, they're higher quality, but the error rate is still, let's say 5% or something. So you would never use this as a substitute. You would never quote whatever the Whisper model produces, but it is good enough it will direct you to where the speaker says something. And then you would go back and listen to that portion, get the verbatim quote, and then you can include it in whatever legal filing or something. So that's a very important general rule is don't solely rely on what large language models tell you. They are known to do what is called hallucination, which is just make up facts that sound good. Now, from the large language model's perspective, they're not making it up. The way they operate is that they're trying to give an accurate answer based off their training. Um, they're not intentionally doing it. These are just algorithms, basically, these large language models, and they're trying to produce an answer that is accurate. And there are different studies about the accuracy of these models. So sometimes it ranges from 70% accuracy to 95% accuracy, depending on the model. And it's changing all the time because these companies are constantly updating these models. So don't be that attorney who files something in a court, excuse me, citing a case that does not exist. And this has already happened. And so courts are now having to deal with um, AI assisted legal briefs and stuff like that. So ChatGPT itself, which is free for basic access, and then if you pay $20 a month, you can get unlimited access to the better models. Well, there are some restrictions, but basically unlimited access. Um, you could throw in a brief and say rewrite this portion or whatever, and it will produce really good results. So it's really good at rephrasing or rewriting things for you or checking for grammar. Um, if your spell check, let's say you're using Microsoft Word, spell check is good, but it's not going to necessarily improve the structure of a sentence or other things like that. Whereas a large language model can check more than just grammar about misspellings or whatnot. Another issue is with spell checkers, if you misspell a word, but your misspelling is a legitimate word, it's just not the word that needs to fit in that part of the sentence. This has happened where there's a letter off in a word and it's just a typo, but the misspelling is actually a legitimate word in English. Like spell checkers won't catch that, but a large language model will. Make sure if you send stuff to ChatGPT, if you just copy and paste it, you don't want to include any attorney-client information or confidential information. That's arguably a violation of your ethical duties. So one way you can avoid this is replace all instances of the client's name or any identifying information with stuff like party A or party B, for example, or account number 1234, for example, and include substitutes like that that doesn't take away from the entire structure of what you're writing. It just sort of anonymizes everything. And then once you make those modifications, copy and paste it, send to ChatGPT, ask it to rewrite it. And you could say, rewrite it for, I want it to sound a certain way. I want it to flow better in general. I want it to be more professional. I want you to reorganize it. Once you experiment with it, you will get a sense of the prompts, the instructions you need to give along with the text to sort of guide the large language model's response. So those are just a couple use cases of how you can use large language models as an attorney. There are lots of others. Um, One other interesting way I've used them is, let's say you have, I don't know, 1,000 pictures from a client, and you want to find out which picture shows a certain thing, or you want quick summaries of the pictures. Well, there are large language models that are referred to as vision models. And what they do is that they've been specifically trained to analyze images and create descriptions of what are in them. So if you have somebody in your IT who's familiar with these, that can save you a tremendous amount of time to basically have a text file that describes every single image that you feed the large language model. So you could then, after you have that list, you can just do a regular text search for certain keywords. So let's say I have 1,000 pictures and one is of somebody at the zoo. Well, you open the text file with all these summaries and you just search for the word zoo, and it automatically will find the picture. So it's really, useful to save time, but it is not a substitute for still coming up with legal arguments and writing briefs, making sure your citations are correct, etc. One last use case I'll mention, it is very useful, I've found, is you can paste the entire text of a case into ChatGPT, for example, and then you can ask it to summarize the case. Or you can ask it to write a brief on the case and say, I want your brief to include a summary of the facts in a couple sentences, the holdings of the case, and then the court's reasoning. And ChatGPT will actually structure its answer based off of your instructions. Now, again, you always want to go back and check and double check the large language model's response. But it is good enough that it gives you an idea of the case and the legal issues at stake and what the court held. So I describe it to people like this, and this has come up in my personal life regarding summarizing medical issues. Not me personally, but for someone else I was helping out. I summarize the medical research on a certain issue, and the large language model did an excellent job of summarizing it and understanding the medical terminology. But based on the fact that the hallucination rate, let's say, is 5%. So that means 95% of the things it says are correct, 5% are not. So would you bet your life on that 5%? Of course not. You would want to check with a real doctor. But the large language model can save you a lot of time and give you good enough information to feel prepared to discuss these things with a doctor or whatever. So in the same way, if you get a case brief, it is good enough to give you an idea of, oh, okay, this case, I don't really need to pay attention to it. It's not on point or whatever. But if you find a case and you say, okay, this sounds really, really good, I'm going to use it in my brief, you still need to go read the case. You still have to go read the case to make sure the large language model's descriptions are accurate. And I've tested this, and they're not always accurate. And it's very hard, too, because these large language models are not trained specifically on legal case law, necessarily. Now, there are certain models, they're starting to get into that realm. Some companies are introducing models specifically trained towards case law, and they do better at understanding case law, but they're not perfect still. So you have to be aware of this, but they can save you a lot of time, whether it's transcribing audio to text, summarizing cases, summarizing images, or whatever. So my recommendation is you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to help, just to give you an introduction of where to point you, or talk to your IT department, discuss with them ways where you can start using this stuff in your practice. Just be aware, as the attorney, you have the primary responsibility to make sure things are done ethically and legally. Um, if you use them correctly, it could save your clients a lot of money. Um, Summarizing things, rewriting things, all that saves a lot of money for the client if you don't have to spend as much time on them, and which makes your business more competitive ultimately. So I hope this has been useful. Please feel free to reach out to me in the comments below. This YouTube channel is just sort of a hobby that where I post videos as I come across stuff that's interesting. All of this is just extra in addition to my legal practice. It's a hobby that keeps me out of trouble. It's fun learning about these things. It's exciting. And LLMs are around to stay. AI is around to stay. And it's a tool that is going to be used and refined in the future. And so it behooves attorneys to start learning about them and start trying to use them. So I hope it's been helpful, and thanks for stopping by.